Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today we are right back into the August meet for ARC. So I know we've literally just gone through 2 weeks of Hybrid World, but this is the turnaround here. We had Hybrid World, there was then 2 weeks of free time, and then it is straight back into the regular monthly meets for ARC. So of course, at the end of the last video, everything was pretty much gone. All of my robots were kind of in some various state of disarray. So we need some more robots, and we need to build those robots really, really quickly because it is already time, as I said, to get into this ARC meet. This time round, we are only going to be doing destructive and 2v2 fights. So thankfully I don't have to get any of the beetles back up and running, but I still do have a bit of work to do. So let's get started on that. So here we go with This Is a Party's first fight. Now, unfortunately, in the hasty build for This Is a Party, the brand new motor mount actually went into the wrong spot. So when I got to the event, the weapon bar didn't spin up because it touched the ground every time I tried to spin it up. So I had to make some modifications to the pontoons. I had to basically add tape underneath them so that the weapon didn't hit the ground, which means that the wedges aren't all that great, but it's not going to matter for this fight because I'm forcing a horizontal, so a lot of these are going to be bar-on-bar contacts like that, and bang! With one big hit, I've managed to knock out one of my wedgelets and completely break his motor, or at least the mounting for his motor. My motor is still attached, but you can kind of just see in here that my wires going to my brushless motor for the weapon are actually wrapped around the weapon. There you go, that's a good shot of it. And yeah, that's not a good thing. That means I could technically spin my weapon up, but if I did so, I would rip the wires either out of the ESC or out of the motor. And we don't really want to do that because then that thing is never going to work again. Also, as you can see, at this point, I've now lost a wheel as well as one of my wedges, and I'm stuck upside down. All of this is basically just self-inflicted damage at this point. And yeah, it's not going all that well. Admittedly, that big hit is just phenomenal. I love that hit. It was such a good hit. I mean, it broke me a little bit, but at least my weapon is still attached. And so if the cables weren't wrapped around, I could technically be spinning it right now. But of course, that's not the case. Now, here I am with one wheel up against an open pit. So I think we kind of all know where this fight is now going. But so far, I mean, I'm pretty happy with this. I designed This As a Party to deal out some big hits, and I think that was a very big hit. I did, of course, end up losing that one because even though I kind of technically went in the pit second, I was pushed down the pit and was not in control of that. So I lost that fight. And here's the damage. As you can see, one of the whole front wedgelets fell off. It was actually hit by my own weapon in that collision. And then it was time for 2v2s with Slightly Rubber, and in this round of 2v2s, I am with Nate, who is the 5-year-old son of Steve, who was actually driving one of the two robots that we were first up against. And just in the kind of pre-fight Twitch test that you just saw, Slightly Rubber, one of the wheels wasn't working, and so I had to rip it out of the arena because it had actually broken one of the cables to one of the motors. And in dealing with all of this, it kind of turned out that something had gone wrong in the actual Arduino set that I was running inside of it. So I had to swap the whole section out just for some regular RC electronics, which then leads on to the actual 2v2 fight. And here is that fight. So Slightly Rubber is now all completely kitted out with some brand new electronics, actually borrowed off of Steve. So Steve is driving Cut Above, which is the thwack bot in the arena right now. And his other son is driving the Force, which is the four-wheel drive robot. So aside from me, it's a bit of a family affair in there, but I mean, I guess it's kind of a family affair with me in there as well, because I'm driving with some of his electronics. So there's a lot of Steve's robots in the arena right now, and I am struggling a lot with this. The new electronics in this thing are just really twitchy. I am finding it incredibly difficult to turn where I want to turn, and just overall bot control was something I basically needed to relearn on the fly in the middle of a fight. So that's why there's a lot of stuff where I'm kind of pushing around Nate's little hammer bot, the blue one, which is a really cool bot, but yeah, I just kind of kept running into it because I was not driving very well at all at this point in time. So this is always going to be a bit of an interesting one because with me kind of out for driving, yeah, I wasn't too confident with how this was going to go. Obviously now we have a pit open, so everybody's got a target that they're now trying to aim for. And yeah, that's kind of where this is going to go, is we're just going to try and push anybody and everybody into those pits, as you normally do when it is just wedges fighting, which kind of seems to happen in the 2v2s. People don't particularly like to put a weapon in because they end up usually hitting their teammates and doing a lot of damage to their team, which is always a bad thing. And then so here, Nate has now gone down the pit, which means it's just me versus two robots. And I'm still kind of spinning out a little bit. So I get one of them down the pit, but obviously that's not enough to win the fight. And because the repair work on Slightly Rubber took a little bit longer than expected, we went basically straight into another 2v2 fight. So we basically had two back-to-back 2v2 fights. And in this case, we're up against Rhino and Drop Saw, which actually has a saw blade on a movable arm, which getting that inside the 150 weight class is just impressive. Like, the fact that he can move that saw as well as spin it is just crazy to me. Obviously, to do that, he has had to sacrifice a lot of armor, so I was kind of missing this as a party at this point, because if I had managed to put a weapon in the arena, Drop Saw would have ended this fight in a very different shape than it did. But yeah, as you can see here, he gets hold of me a couple of times and digs the saw in, but I've got PLA Plus as the top lid there, and it worked out pretty well. So unfortunately here already, Nate has gone down the pit, so it is back up to me, but I've got both of them actually flipped over at the moment. Obviously, Rhino that is on my nose is actually a flipper, so that didn't really do too much. Although his flipper did seem to be a little bit weak this time round. And then, of course, somehow they managed to both get upright and then also get me upside down, which is even worse because now I'm running with a twitchy controller and running all of my controls backwards because, of course, not using my own stuff, I definitely don't have invertible controls. Invertible controls are something I want to do on my own controllers at some point, but even if I did have those in place, this would not help me here because I'm not using my own electronics, which is, yeah, not fun at all. So, yeah, twitchy and upside down. Obviously, all I'm trying to do here is stay alive, stay away from that saw, and find a way to flip myself back over. So you'll see here, I kind of jam myself into the wall a lot, hoping that the momentum and force of me driving around is going to be enough to actually flip the whole robot over. That doesn't actually end up being the case, and right here, Rhino seems to be kind of struggling against a pit, so I'm trying to get over there to help push him down, but that did not, unfortunately, happen. And I'm like, okay, Rhino is probably my best case for flipping myself over at this point. The walls just aren't working, as you can see. They're just not doing anything for me. So I'm going to have to try and hit him head on. And yes, we get back in the fight, just like that. So we're back on my wheels. I can actually be a bit more of a threat again. And just like that, jam Rhino down the pit. But of course, put myself in a precarious position and go down the pit myself. So that one was a close one. Yeah, it was, yeah, very close. So back to This Is a Party now that we've got some of those 2v2 fights out of the way, and now we are up against Blade Tip, who is always going to be a bit of a problem for me, and he immediately pulls off both of the silicon tires on my robot, which means that now, even though the blade was perfectly balanced before and not hitting the ground, it's lowered the whole robot down, and so the blade actually does hit the ground now, which is what's happening here. I am just kind of bouncing all over the place when I try and spin the weapon up. And now I've got one wheel and I'm sitting on top of the pits. So this is not going the way I wanted it to go. I really do need to do something about these wheels. The D shafts on the N20 motors that pretty much everybody uses for Antweights just don't hold very well, or at least I haven't found anything that holds very well on them. I think the best I've ever done is ABS tires or ABS wheels, and those hold okay, but they only last for a couple of matches or a couple of months, and then they disappear again. So here I'm kind of trying to self-right, but there's not really a whole lot of point. Even when I'm back on my wheels like this, or my wheel, I'm still just kind of bouncing around all over the place. Running the weapon just causes it to hit the ground and bounce the robot here, there, and everywhere, which is uncontrolled, but you know, it's better than not moving at all. So that's kind of what I've just been doing here. And then I finally work out that I've actually got the weapon motor mounted the wrong way because it undoes the bolt. Trying to flip back over, it undoes the bolt. And yeah, it means that I couldn't flip myself back over and I end up in the pit. And here we go with another This Is a Party fight. So I've actually hot glued the wheels on this time, and that means that things are going a little bit better. And I actually do manage to get a few big hits in here, but something happens, and I think some of the tape that I was using to hold my blade up off the ground actually got hit or came off in one of those hits. And what that meant is that I am now bouncing around all over the place again. So I kind of have just been foiled a little bit by this whole weapon mount not sitting where it's supposed to be. And this time I just committed. I just ran the weapon at full speed and bounced around all over the arena, as you just saw. Just basically realizing that there's not much else that I could do in this situation. And unfortunately, I actually turned myself off here. My switch slips out, and in one of the bounces, the switch gets turned off by the robot landing on it. And here we go, back to the 2v2s. And I'm actually feeling a little bit more confident going into this fight in terms of my driving ability. I've kind of learned a little bit about the whole driving for this new system, or at least I've kind of got myself a little bit better at it. So as you can see, I'm actually able to attack a little bit more. And the plan for me really is to kind of attack the wedge bot and just kind of push it round until the pit's open, and then I'm going to, well, I'm kind of should avoid the flail as long as the flail is spinning, was basically the idea. The rubber should be able to absorb any hits from the flail, but even then, it's not a good idea. There's enough stuff around that kind of worries me. Like, those wheels of mine are a little bit exposed, so if the flail hits a wheel and knocks a wheel off, or knocks the silicon off a wheel, then that's just going to inconvenience me, and yeah, I don't really want any of that. So yeah, we kind of avoided the flail as much as possible. I was trying to push the wedge bot into him a little bit, and did get a couple of pushes like that where he did end up in the wedge bot, or inside the flail, but obviously it didn't do too much. It's a full ABS chassis, so it wasn't ever going to get all that damage. But now the wedge bot is out of the way, and it's time to take on the flail. And I'm basically just kind of jabbing at him here, as you can see, and then managed to get him as he span down and pushed us both into the pit, so that Nath was the last person in, and he won the fight for us. So here we go, it is end of the day Rumble time. So obviously this is a party that lost every single one of its fights, putting it at the very bottom of the ladder. And with one win in the 2v2s, Slightly Rubber actually ended up in third place for that, because there was only 4 people competing, so we came second to last, but we still technically placed on the whole. So this is the all-in Rumble. Basically everybody with a robot still working is just running around and having a go at each other. And I figured I was going to put this as a party in play, just because, you know, why not? It's already lost pretty much everything, and if it blows itself to pieces, that's okay, because, well, the whole motor mount system was bad in the first place, so it needs to be rebuilt. So if the chassis dies, I don't really care too much about that. And once again, in this fight, just like the last fight, I was kind of like running the weapon at just full tilt all the time, and just bouncing around and just going with it. And then, yeah, somewhere around here, I think the switch got hit and left on, but then I'm also kind of sitting up on my weapon and not actually able to move, so technically I'm counted out, but yeah, it's not really going all that well for me here, as you can see. And basically, with all of the big spinners and stuff around the place, I just kind of stop and let myself get pushed over to the side, because what I really don't want to happen is a spinner to hit me and, yeah, anything. So here we've got the flail bot has actually had its top come off, which means the batteries have been exposed, so that had to be pulled out of the Rumble before we could continue. So we had to just, yeah, quickly call time there, because of course the last thing we want is a lipo fire. These lipo batteries really aren't big enough to cause a lipo fire, but still it's not something that you actually want to have happen. And you really don't want people's batteries getting destroyed. Yeah, so then the Rumble does continue on here. There's not a lot of big hits left to come, so I think we might call it here, because as you can see, I'm stuck over in the corner, and I am just going to stay there now. Yeah, and the spinners are still kind of there, but they don't really last very long from this point. So like I said, I think I'm going to call that one here, because I very much lose this Rumble. So on the whole, yeah, not my greatest event, as you could see. This is a party just obviously had that issue where the weapon was constantly hitting the ground, and that was literally just to do with the fact that the weapon mount that I put in here sat in wrong when I glued it, and that was it. So I'm planning on going back to This Is a Party and doing version 3 at some point in the future, probably with an ABS shell rather than the PLA Plus shell that this is currently running. And in that version, we're going to actually have a proper mount for this. At the moment, there's just kind of a hole, and there's 2 mounting points front and back that kind of hold it into place. But as I found out, that isn't a great system because I can mess it up, apparently. So yeah, we're going to fix that in the new version of this guy, but it's going to be a little while before we get to this, because the very next thing I'm doing is I'm going to AVC in the States for September, or early September, which means I'm probably going to miss the ARC September meet, so I'm not going to worry about my Antweights for the time being. Instead, I'm going to work on a beta weight and a featherweight to get myself ready to go over to AVC in September. But once I get back from that, then this is a party we'll get some updates and some changes and make sure that the weapon doesn't hit the ground all the time and also doesn't hit itself, because that was what happened in that first fight where one of these side wedgelets came off. That was actually my weapon got kind of pushed out sideways a little bit, hit the plastic of it and ripped it off itself. Which is a lot of damage. This weapon system can do a lot of damage. I need to work on reliability issues, and I need to work on it so that it actually spins properly and doesn't bounce all over the place as it did in this meet. And then, of course, we got third for the 2v2s with the new version of Slightly Rubber. I like this new chassis. This new chassis is doing well. The new design is good. It really did just come down to a case of having to learn how to drive with the new electronics inside of it. And I've swapped back to the old electronics, or I've kind of put the old electronics in it for bringing it home. And I need to sort something out. I think it's going to go back to the Arduino system, but yeah, I don't know at this point. There's a few little bits and pieces that I want to do. And in fact, I might use Slightly Rubber here as a bit of a test platform for some things going forwards. But as I said, that's for another day, because we're not going to be working on Antweights for a little while. Yeah, so I hope you guys have enjoyed that one, and next week we'll definitely be working on something a little bit bigger. So I will see you in that video.